Okay, I want to hurry through your calls because there's a bunch of news I want to get to before Webster Tarpley joins us to break down the big developments in the economy, what's happening on the Korean Peninsula, and, of course, with Israel and the flotilla. Get his perspective, always informative coming up. But going back to Frank in New York, Frank, normally when a nation announces it's going to start stopping shipping, that's a big issue. But you've got a multi-nation flotilla, the main ship out of Turkey. Turkey inspected the vessels, said no weapons were on board. And now, for those that just joined us, Turkey is all over the news saying they are already dispatching 4 frigates and support ships to that area of the Mediterranean off the coast of Israel to aid future convoys. So Turkey, it appears, is now looking for a confrontation with Israel. They have a word for it, but we have children listening, a you-know-what match. And I go back to the last few months, as I kept saying, the globalists want to start wars. And look what's happening in North Korea. Look what's happening in Israel. Look what's happening in Pakistan. Look how Cheney tried to start a war with Russia 2 years ago. Clearly, they're not going to be able to continue this banking takeover. That's what they really care about, is looting the U.S., looting Europe, consolidating power, setting up the police state, without having wars to politically distract people. Finish up your point, Frank, in New York.
Wanted to say is this, Israel seized the Turkish vessels. So actually, under international law, Turkey has every right to go into to retrieve those vessels. Plus, normally, through diplomatic back channels, if you're going to seize ships on the high sea with governments or their problems, you actually inform the governments of this, of your intentions. You have to do that. If you think back to the Lusitania, you remember that the German government put ads 2 weeks in advance in the American press about do not travel, on this ship due to the fact that it's going into dangerous waters and all this stuff. But the Germans knew that, the U.S. was sending weapons to Great Britain on those ships, which was in violation of international law as well, being a neutral nation at that time. So what you have to remember is that this actually is planned. What I wanted to also say that struck me on Friday was when the Wayne Madsen reported that Barack Obama and Rahm Emanuel are members of the Gay Bathhouse Club in Chicago, and that they have membership cards. And I was thinking, this is very strange. Why would this come out, especially Rahm Emanuel? And after further looking into it, apparently the Israeli press had known about this and leaked it, and it's very interesting that all of the world press is aware of this story, but none of it's coming out in the American major media. And I found that to be very strange because you wouldn't want to destroy, in a sense, the credibility of your number one supporter, Rahm Emanuel, in the White House. And I thought that was one of the most bizarre things to have happened. But I never would have anticipated that Israel would have attacked on Monday the peace flotilla. And to me, it just is, it's mashugana, it's craziness. And it's time to maybe enforce the Symington Amendment, because ultimately the weapons used in this were financed by the United States aid to the country. And the Symington Amendment prohibits any use of American aid or assistance, against civilians in a war situation. So by enforcing the Symington Amendment that should have been enforced back in Operation Cast Lead, December of 2008 and January of 2009, the aid to Israel would have been stopped. And I think that would waken up the members of the Knesset and the coalition parties to really look at the reality of the world, as opposed to just this endless check that's
Frank,
American.
I hear you, and those are all great points, and I'm glad you brought up the Lusitania. I appreciate your call, because I meant to start the show with that. I was thinking about that driving in. Here you have the Germans for 2 weeks in New York and New Jersey and other papers running ads saying, do not take passage to London or to other cities on this list of ships. And chief among them was the Lusitania, which was carrying armaments and soldiers. And that is what got the United States into World War I. And absolutely, The Germans had been for years sinking British ships all over the Atlantic and the Mediterranean during World War I. Hard-fought war, a lot of it with U-boat wolf packs. And it was sunk, of course, off the Irish coast. And our media spun it and said, oh, my gosh, the Germans did this on purpose when, and wanted to kill Americans. When, no, the Germans had said, don't sail on this ship. So a lot of wars have started over blockades. Let's go back to the Cuban Missile Crisis in the early 60s. We went to the very highest DEFCON right before launching weapons. It was almost World War III. And then in back channels, Kennedy got on the phone with Nikita Khrushchev, and this has now been declassified, and said, look, the Pentagon wants to kill me, and they want to have nuclear war with you, and I'm in danger of a coup. Our military probably has close to double the high-tech weapons you have, nukes. This has even been a Frontline special, but I knew about it separately from Frontline. I don't just watch Frontline and believe it. I mean, this has been declassified in the last decade. And before they'd even declassified Northwoods, it was in the news that he said, look, L.L. Limnitzer and others that are getting ready to fire, they could overthrow me. They want to have nuclear war with you. And at that time, Curtis LeMay was running around the head of the Air Force saying, nuke 'em, nuke 'em. That's why they made the movie Dr. Strangelove 3 years later about that, with General Jack T. Ripper, playing the part of Curtis LeMay. And they really intended to have nuclear war. And Kennedy said no. Another reason they killed him. I'm not saying Kennedy was an angel or Kennedy was perfect. His brother, Bobby, it turned out in 62, and this was declassified by the State Department 2 months ago, wanted to attack areas of Central and South America by blowing up, namely Honduras, by blowing up U.S. embassies and blaming it on their government. It was just when it came to killing Americans that Kennedy said no. This is such a part of governance. My only issue is I think it takes the political power away from this when you depoliticize it or de-radicalize it and just look at it objectively and coldly as a fact. I remember when I was on air in 1996 criticizing communist generals from China in the Commerce Department with their own faxes and phone lines and email, selling out U.S. sovereignty. And Treasury Secretary Ron Brown said, I'm not going to go to prison, I'll go public. And they killed him deader than a hammer. And even the Pentagon coroner, the colonel, said they all been shot in the head. Special forces on board the plane posing as security, killed everybody, blew the door, and high-load or he-load out of the aircraft. But